The revival of the religious sciences. A structural and thematic analysis of Imam al-Ghazali's Ihya Ulum al-Din. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Sufi Essence with Hamid Said. In the vast and intricate history of Islamic thought, few works have exerted an influence as pervasive and transformative as Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali's magnum opus, Ihya Ulum al-Din, the revival of the religious sciences, written in the 11th century. This colossal work of spiritual and intellectual synthesis emerged from a period of profound personal and intellectual crisis for Ghazali. A revered jurist and theologian, he famously abandoned his prestigious position at the Nisamea school in Baghdad to embark on a decade-long journey of self-discovery, seeking a truth that transcended the dry intellectual formalism of his time. The Ihya is the definitive fruit of that journey, a monumental effort to bridge the widening chasm between the legalistic scholars, fuqaha, and the esoteric mystics, Sufis, and to reinfuse the pillars of Islamic practice with the spirit of inner spiritual reality. Today, we will undertake a comprehensive structural and thematic analysis of this seminal work. We will move beyond a simple summary to engage with the intricate architecture of Ghazali's thought, which meticulously guides the reader through a systematic program for the purification of the heart and the revival of faith. We will argue that the Ihya Ulum al-Din is a masterwork of integrated Islamic thought, systematically moving from the outer forms of worship to the inner spiritual states, and from the diagnosis of spiritual diseases to the cultivation of saving virtues. Our discourse will follow the book's four-part structure, dedicating a section to each of the major divisions: the Book of Worship, Kitab al-Ibadat; the Book of Habits, Kitab al-Adat; the Book of the Destructive Vices, Kitab al-Muhlikat; and the Book of the Saving Virtues, Kitab al-Mungat. Our objective is to illuminate how the Ihya remains a timeless guide, a blueprint for a holistic and living Islam. Part 1. The Book of Worship. Kitab al-Ibadat. The Ihya begins with the foundational principles of a Muslim's life, but Ghazali's treatment is anything but conventional. In this first quarter, which is comprised of 10 sub-books, Ghazali takes the 5 pillars of Islam and meticulously transforms them from mere legal obligations into profound spiritual experiences. He argues that without an inner spiritual dimension, these acts of worship are little more than empty gestures. The first 2 books, Kitab al-Ilm, the Book of Knowledge, and Kitab Qawad al-Aqad, the Book of the Foundations of Belief, establish the intellectual and theological framework for the entire work. Ghazali begins by critiquing the pursuit of knowledge for worldly gain, such as prestige or wealth. He insists that true knowledge is that which draws one closer to God, and that the ultimate purpose of knowledge is not to win debates, but to cultivate humility and sincerity. In the Book of Belief, he presents a balanced theological framework that avoids both the sterile rationalism of the philosophers and the blind traditionalism of the common masses. He lays a foundation of orthodox belief that is both intellectually sound and spiritually nurturing. The next 5 books are dedicated to the practical pillars of Islam: ritual purity tahara, prayer salat, charity zakat, fasting psalm, and pilgrimage hajj. In each of these, Ghazali performs his revival. For instance, in his treatment of prayer, he goes far beyond the physical motions and legal requirements. He speaks of the necessity of inner presence, khushu, of the heart being fully engaged in the conversation with God. He describes prayer as a journey from the initial purification of the body to the final annihilation of the self in the divine presence. The physical acts of bowing and prostrating are presented as outward manifestations of an inner spiritual submission. He applies this same methodology to the other pillars, transforming fasting into an act of purifying the soul of its animalistic desires, and Hajj into a symbolic journey of separation from the world and return to the divine. The final books of this quarter, on the recitation of the Quran and remembrance of God dhikr, are the culmination of this spiritual approach to worship. Ghazali shows that the entire life of a Muslim should be a continuous act of worship, a constant state of mindfulness and remembrance of God. He teaches that through the proper recitation of the Quran, the heart can be transformed, and through constant remembrance of God, the soul can find peace. Part 2. The Book of Habits. Kitab al-Adat. The second quarter of the IHR is a testament to Ghazali's genius for integrating the sacred into the mundane. He argues that the spiritual life is not confined to the mosque or the private chamber, but must permeate every aspect of one's daily existence. This section acts as a bridge, showing how the inner spiritual state cultivated through worship should govern one's interactions with the world. The sacred is not a separate sphere of existence, but is woven into the very fabric of our habits and social conduct. Ghazali begins this section with books on food, marriage, and earning a livelihood. He provides a spiritual etiquette for the most basic human needs, reminding the reader that every action, no matter how mundane, can be an act of worship if performed with the right intention. He teaches that eating should be an act of gratitude to God, not a mindless indulgence. Marriage is presented as not just a social contract, but a spiritual partnership that helps one on the path to God. And earning a livelihood is not a purely materialistic endeavor, but a means of supporting one's family and fulfilling a religious duty. Ghazali's message here is one of balance and moderation, steering the seeker away from both the excessive asceticism that rejects the world entirely and the worldly materialism that forgets God. The next several books of this quarter are dedicated to social ethics and brotherhood. Ghazali lays out a detailed ethical framework for building a righteous community, emphasizing the importance of sincerity, mutual respect, and love among believers. He writes on the etiquette of social gatherings, the duties of a host and a guest, and the rights of a Muslim upon another Muslim. This section beautifully synthesizes the legalistic duties of a Muslim with the ethical and spiritual virtues of a Sufi. The outer form of social conduct is shown to be a direct reflection of the inner spiritual state. The book on enjoining good and forbidding evil is a powerful culmination of this section, where Ghazali provides a detailed and nuanced guide on how to perform this critical duty with wisdom, compassion, and a deep understanding of human psychology. Through the Kitab al-Adat, Ghazali meticulously demonstrates that the religious sciences are not just a set of abstract rules, but a living, breathing tradition that provides a comprehensive ethical and spiritual framework for all of human life. Part 3. The Book of the Destructive Vices. Kitab al-Muhlikat. The third quarter of the IIA represents a profound and meticulous spiritual diagnosis. Having laid out the positive framework for a life of worship and virtuous habits, Ghazali now turns to the diseases of the heart that, if left unchecked, can destroy a person's spiritual state. He uses the metaphor of the heart as a patient and the spiritual guide, or the Ihya itself as the physician, providing a clear diagnosis and a specific cure for each spiritual ailment. This section is a testament to Ghazali's deep psychological insight and his profound understanding of human nature. Ghazali dedicates a series of books to the major vices of the heart, which he identifies as the primary source of all spiritual illnesses. He meticulously analyzes pride, kibr, the belief that one is superior to others, a state that stems from the ego's false sense of self-importance; arrogance, ugb, the self-admiration and satisfaction with one's own religious or worldly state; envy, hasad, the bitter feeling toward others for the blessings God has bestowed upon them; miserliness, bukhil, the excessive love of worldly possessions and the inability to give in the way of God. The vices of the tongue. Ghazali dedicates an entire book to the dangers of the tongue, which he identifies as the primary organ through which the inner diseases of the heart manifest. He details the harms of backbiting, slander, lying, and gossip, and provides a clear spiritual cure for each. In his analysis of each vice, Ghazali provides a comprehensive treatment. He begins by defining the vice, identifying its causes and symptoms, explaining its spiritual harm, and then provides a practical and spiritual cure. His cures are a masterful blend of intellectual understanding and practical spiritual exercises, guiding the seeker to not just intellectualize the problem, but to actively purify their heart. This section of the Ihya is a crucial manual for Tazkiya, purification of the soul, a necessary step on the path to God. He argues that one cannot build a magnificent spiritual edifice on a foundation that is rotting with spiritual disease. The heart must first be cleansed before it can be filled with divine light. Part 4. The Book of the Saving Virtues. Kitab al-Muhlikat. The final and culminating quarter of the IHI is a guide to the positive virtues and states of being that a seeker must cultivate to achieve true and lasting happiness. Having diagnosed and provided cures for the diseases of the heart, Ghazali now outlines the qualities that lead to salvation and inner tranquility. This section is a spiritual blueprint for a life of purpose and proximity to the divine. Ghazali begins this quarter with books on patience, sabr, and gratitude shukr. Presents these two virtues as two sides of the same coin and as foundational states for the spiritual seeker. Patience is the ability to endure hardship with dignity and grace, while gratitude is the ability to recognize and be thankful for God's blessings even in the midst of hardship. He argues that a tranquil heart is a heart that is content with God's decree, whether it brings ease or difficulty. He then moves on to books on fear Kaf and hope Raja, which he presents as two essential wings for the flight of the soul. Fear of God's punishment and hope in His mercy are two balanced states that, when held in equilibrium, prevent the seeker from falling into either despair or complacency. This is a classic Sufi teaching, where both fear and hope are seen as necessary motivators for spiritual growth. The culmination of the entire work is in the final books, which are dedicated to the highest states of the spiritual path. Ghazali speaks of love Mahabba as the ultimate spiritual state, the highest form of worship, and the ultimate purpose of the soul's journey. He argues that all other virtues, from patience to fear, are mere preparations for the state of divine love. He also discusses intention ikhlas, which he presents as the key that unlocks all spiritual doors, and contemplation muraqabah, which he describes as a state of continuous mindfulness and awareness of God's presence. The Ihya concludes with a discussion of death and the afterlife, a final reminder that the spiritual journey is not an end in itself, but a preparation for a reality that is eternal. In conclusion, Imam al-Ghazali's Ihya Ulum is a masterwork of integrated Islamic thought, a comprehensive and systematic guide for the revival of the Muslim soul. Its enduring legacy is its ability to bridge the gap between the outer forms of religious practice and the inner spiritual reality, transforming Islam from a dry legalism into a living, vibrant, and holistic tradition. Ghazali's genius was in his ability to diagnose the spiritual maladies of his time and to provide a timeless, perennial cure. The Ihya is not a book of disconnected topics, but a unified, coherent roadmap for the spiritual journey, a testament to the belief that the path to God is a journey of the heart, and that with sincerity and perseverance, the seeker can achieve the ultimate goal of true happiness and proximity to the divine. Thank you for joining us on this intellectual and spiritual journey. Please subscribe to our channel to continue our exploration of the rich and profound essence of Sufism.